All right, good evening. Welcome. Thank you so much to those of you who are joining us this evening. It is 7:01. We're going to give folks another minute or two to join us, and then we'll get started promptly. It is 7:02. We are going to go ahead and get started. Thanks again for joining us this evening. My name is Ashley Furin, the founding head of school at HLA2, and I am delighted to be here tonight with my colleagues, John Rosenberg, our CEO, our Chief Schools Officer, Emily Fernandez, and our Chief Operating Officer, Jonathan Worley. This evening, we're going to have an opportunity to recap Hebrew Public's response to COVID-19. We're going to speak a bit about our spring reopening plan, and we're going to look ahead to the future. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to you, John.
Thank you, Ashley, and good evening, everyone. Just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge what an incredibly challenging year this has been. We have not seen anything like this, I think, in our lifetimes. I want to express on behalf of the whole Hebrew Public and HLA2 team our love and caring and empathy for each of your families. We know how hard the situation has been for many of you. And that it's been a year of trauma and loss in many ways. Notwithstanding that, we've also seen children thriving, we've seen children learning, we've seen children come to school for that period of time that we were able to be open. And as you'll hear more tonight about our reopening plan and our hopes for next school year, we're also filled with a lot of hope and a lot of pride for what this small charter school network and our small but mighty HLA2 school team have accomplished. We have really relied on our organizational values, what we call the Olam values, in making decisions and trying to solve problems and communicate with you all so that we can make as positive a difference in the lives of your children as we can. I can have the next slide, please. So I'm going to turn it now to my colleague, Emily Fernandez, our Chief Schools Officer, who's going to give you a bit of a recap about our response thus far to the challenges of COVID.
Great, thanks, John. And good evening, everyone. As noted, I am the Chief Schools Officer, Emily Fernandez. I work very closely with Ms. Furin and all of our heads of schools across our 4 schools, as well as partnering with our senior team at the network for overall strategy. I'm just going to share a bit of a recap here. Since last year, a little over a year ago, we did close all of our schools at the start of the pandemic, March 13th, and we were able to, through just really intentional planning and collaboration with the school leaders, continue instruction remotely that Monday, March 16th. With that, we also were able to kick off distribution of technology, laptops, devices, making sure that all of our kids had sufficient technology support at home. It wasn't an immediate result in every single home, but we really started the effort on March 17th and continued it until we made sure every kid had what they need. Our directors of ops, Ms. Lucas and others, just took a huge lead here. We continued throughout the spring, and at the close of the school year, we're able to launch something really neat called Camp Hebrew Public, which was just a way to increase connection and increase Hebrew exposure and just some joy. These were entirely optional, but really encourage opportunities for kids from all of our schools, our 4 network schools here in New York and Philadelphia, as well as our affiliate schools across the country, to come together for just fun, engaging programming. So we had some cooking episodes, we had some read alouds, Hebrew read alouds, really wonderful and joyous times to try to maintain connectivity in this time when everyone was experiencing such isolation. We reopened our schools in September, and that was a choice that we felt really strongly about. You know, not all of our peers across the city charter schools did. Many did not open for in-person learning, but we felt that we wanted to give families that choice of the opportunity to come into our building to learn safely with precautions, or if it felt best for that family or was simply a necessity due to health, that they would have the opportunity to continue remotely. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that has looked like and what it's going to continue to look like. But we did reopen in September. And then in December, we made a pretty challenging decision to close for a stretch of time. I'm sure folks remember the environment at that time. We were looking at rising cases across the city. We were also experiencing some opening and closure of our in-person learning programs, and we had to make a tough decision to close our buildings and shift to fully remote. Our team has done an incredible job. Miss Furin, Miss Pasley, everyone there at HLA, I'm sure you all are familiar with them, HLA2, they really just did an incredible job shifting to remote and making sure that remote instruction was as strong as possible. But now we are at a point where we are ready to reopen our schools, and we're really excited about that. Continue to the next slide, please. So a few more notes here, just the hybrid and remote learning programs offered that we talked about here. And one thing that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, our remote program does have consistent standalone remote teachers. So rather than kind of videoing into a classroom in a building for our kids who are at home, they have their own teacher that is dedicated to them. And of course, that started out as a combined remote program with HLA and HLA2. And then we shifted to strictly HLA2 teachers working with HLA2 students and families. And I think that that's been a positive shift for us as we were able to kind of streamline by school community. And of course, a network academy that I mentioned a moment ago, enrichment Hebrew courses offered after school hours, and just a variety of ways for kids and families to engage with each other. Something that I will also say stands out about our response, and I'm really grateful to John on this. He was quite impassioned about the need to provide childcare programs and childcare options to our families who needed it, right? Who perhaps their child was in school on Monday and Tuesday in cohort A and needed that childcare option, a safe place for them to do their remote days on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And so we were able to create partnerships across the city. And for HLA2, that was JCH of Bensonhurst, where a child could go and safely attend remote schooling on their remote days. We were also able to subsidize that, so families were able to apply, get scholarship support, because we know that this is a time of belt tightening, so to speak, across the city and across the country. So these were some key parts of our response to COVID-19 that we're proud of and that we believe made a difference, and we hope it felt like a positive aspect for you all. Next slide, please. This is my last plug about the Network Academy, but you'll just see a couple of fun images from a Hebrew read aloud of the Hungry Hungry Caterpillar to Bosmat, one of our wonderful Israeli dance teachers at HLA, leading a dance class from her living room. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the incredible things that HLA2 has done to maintain connectivity and keeping Hebrew and all of our courses front and center during this time. And this was something that we were able to do from the network, from the Hebrew Public side. Okay, next slide. So with this, I'm going to hand it over to Jonathan Worley, our Chief Operating Officer. He is my partner in school support, and he's going to talk a bit more about the protocols, the health and safety learnings. And so Jonathan, I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Emily. Hi, everyone. It is really good to be here talking to you. I'm also really excited at the prospect of reopening and getting to come and see all the kids in school for the first time in a while. So thank you for joining us tonight. I'm going to, as Emily said, I'm going to talk a bit about what our experience has been in operating schools in a pandemic and what we've learned over the past year of doing so. What's going to be new in this reopening. So first of all, our overriding focus has and will continue to be the health and safety of our staff and students and supporting our students in whatever way we can. And so, as Emily mentioned, as you all know, we did have to shift to remote in late December. And that was due to exactly what Emily said. There was, COVID spread in the community was dramatically increasing. We felt it was necessary to hit pause on in-school learning in order to keep folks safe, and to give us a break from the instability that Emily mentioned of closing and opening. Now we're at a point where we do feel it is prudent to have students back in school, in the school building. And part of what's influenced that decision is our experience and what we've learned over the past year of actually trying to open schools and keep things running. I'm going to touch on a few of the highlights of those learnings here. So one, and kind of one that we are proud of and find is really important, is that there really is no evidence that we had any spread of COVID within any of our schools. So no one appears to have caught COVID in our schools. And that is a testament to the work of our staff and our students and the families supporting that work in keeping our protocols tight. And so, which is also to say our protocols do appear to work. So a moment to say thank you for supporting your children in enforcing those protocols. I am going to talk a little bit about that and this idea of layered mitigation in a little bit. I want to call out one point in those protocols. We do site-based testing, COVID testing, as those of you who have kids in hybrid are aware. And through that site-based testing, we have been able to identify positive cases of COVID in an asymptomatic person, meaning someone who did not have symptoms but tested positive. And our ability to find that and to make sure that those individuals are not in the community while they're still could still spread the disease, we think has really contributed to a safer environment. And just as I mentioned, we really rely on the work and the help of staff and students, and leaning into our OLAM values, where communication really is a big part of that. And so we do appreciate the feedback and the communication we're getting from staff and from families. We appreciate when people are, reporting, hey, I'm not feeling well today, and reacting on that. So again, thank you. And this has been a big part of what we learned, is that we have to continue in this. All right, we can move on to the next slide. So in addition to learning from our own experience, we're constantly looking at research and getting guidance from federal and state agencies about what is best practice, and that is helping to inform how we're making our decisions around reopening and how to do so. The bottom line on all of this is that research is now showing that provided we take the necessary steps, we can reopen safely for in-person learning. And so that's, as you know, what we're doing. I want to point out a few of the kind of key research points that have come out over the past year. One is that children are much less likely to spread COVID and are far less susceptible to this. Now, does this mean that children can't get serious cases of COVID? No, of course not. That does happen, but it is very rare, and the cases are few and far between. And so the guidance is, because children are not as susceptible, it is safer to have them in school. In addition, and again, I'll talk about this layered mitigation and the different protocols we put in place, but when schools are putting into place appropriate protocols, they do succeed in reducing transmission, and that the risk of transmission really goes down. And then finally, even in communities where there are high rates of COVID, which our community certainly had moments of that, schools that follow these protocols really do still have a lower risk of transmission. So these are kind of like, taking this all in helped really inform our decision now to say we are ready to reopen. We can do this in a safe way. All right, we can move on to the next slide. All right, so I'm going to hand it back off to Ms. Furin, and she's going to speak a little bit about our reopening plan.
Jonathan, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here with all of you tonight to share a bit about what we're doing to plan for reopening in person. As you know, we will welcome hybrid students back to school on April 12th, cohort A on Monday and Tuesday, cohort B on Thursday and Friday. And as some of you may have seen, which we'll talk a little bit about later in this presentation, we are working on a plan to ensure that students who are a part of hybrid are prepared for New York State testing, and feel incredibly confident about the work that we've done up until this point to ensure that staff, students, and families are ready for those days. What we're delighted to share is that the schedules, you'll see some slight shifts in those in terms of timing and in terms of content to ensure that remote and hybrid students are 100% aligned in the instruction that they are receiving. This is great for our kids. It's also great for staff as they can prepare together at a high level. Also delighted, I know one of the things that is a challenge in our space is outdoor space. And so kindergarten to second grade students, weather permitting, will be taking nature walks, and we do have those staffed, and we will continue to follow our safety guidelines. And then for our third and fourth graders who are a part of hybrid, they'll be taking some nature walks and park walks, especially on those testing days, again, to give them some extended time outside and to celebrate their hard work on those days. As always, learning it can be hard, but it can also be fun. That underpins all that we do, and thinking about how we can ensure joy for all of our students, whether they are remote or hybrid. You'll see that we've shared some upcoming movie nights. We have Onward coming up here just at the beginning of April. We have some spirit days. And you may have heard our students elected our mascot, which is a dragon. He has not made any appearances yet, he or she, and is yet to be named. So lots of joy to come as we enter Q4 and continue learning this year. I would love to pass it over to Emily to talk a bit about student progress.
Great, thank you. And I cannot wait to see our dragon, HLA2 dragon, and meet him or her. How exciting. I mean, that's just a key example of what I referenced earlier of how our schools are maintaining joy and community and connection during this incredibly challenging time. So it's it may seem like a small thing, but I am just, consistently impressed by our school teams and what they're able to create for kids, and I'm grateful for it. So as we return from spring break, we will have 12 full weeks of the school year left with children. The year is not over, and we really want to make the most of it. We're really going to be focusing on student progress, right? Academically, socially, and emotionally. So a couple things that some will continue, some are just like flags is coming up. We'll continue to have consistent HLA2 staff dedicated to our remote only cohorts. And again, this is something that we, Hebrew Public, we're really committed to. HLA2 leadership is really committed to having remote students get a quality education that is tailored to them, as opposed to having to kind of zoom into a classroom where a teacher is teaching kids in person and working with the kids on the laptop when they can, right? So we'll continue to have consistent HLA2 staff dedicated to our remote only cohorts. We'll continue to have Hebrew small group for every child every week. And I think this was, again, something that I think we all know that when times are hard, languages, arts, music, those joy, and kind of outside of ELA and math, those are the things that get cut. We did not want to do that. We believe Hebrew is core to our program and our mission. And so we've maintained it, as we've also maintained music and any other number of parts of our program that we think is super important. Okay, we also will have individual-based, data-based academic support through ELA and math small groups. You may already be aware of the small group that your child is a part of. And just a moment, because my small child is coming over. Okay, give me one moment, all right? Thank you. So helpful. He's 4. I wish he could be in one of these math small groups. So those small groups will continue. And Ashley and her team, Ms. Fearon and her team really did a big effort to rearrange the schedule wherever possible to get groups smaller and get kids individual support. We're going to keep working on attendance, monitoring it, and where needed, do individual student support. It is critical that we have our students in class, be it on the computer or be it in person. Whatever we can do to partner with families, we need children in class every day. And we're going to keep looking at the social emotional aspect of being a child during this time period. I think we've all seen our kids struggle in a variety of ways. I think adults are going through some challenging times as well. And so from community meetings that are remote and the entire community can be there for, hybrid and remote students together, to in-person and remote morning meetings and advisory, and community events, which you heard Ashley reference during and after the school day. We do believe that this is a critical part of our mission, and we're committed to maintaining that as we move forward in the spring. Okay, handing it back to Jonathan to talk a bit about what health and safety looks like as we reopen on April 12th.
Thank you, Emily. So I'm just going to do a little refresher on what are guiding principles for health and safety and some of the protocols that we have in place and will continue to have in place as we reopen, as well as talk about some of the changes and adjustments we're making to those for this round of reopening. So for anyone who has participated already in our hybrid program, or anyone who has gone out in the world, these should be pretty familiar. And these are the initiatives that our staff and students have been undertaking up until we had to shift to remote, and we're going to be reinforcing them again now. Just to run through really quickly, the key kind of guiding principles here: social distancing. We are going to maintain appropriate separation in our school at all times. Our staff are there to support that. Personal protective equipment. This most important among these is mask wearing. Everyone in the building must wear a mask at all times. That's students, staff, anyone who enters the building, with a few exceptions, of course, when people are eating or drinking, or if a staff member is alone in a private space. Batching is a concept that those of you who have been participating in hybrid should be familiar with, and that is that an individual classroom, we make every effort to have minimal contact with folks outside of that group, and the reason being, in the event that there is exposure to COVID in a classroom, we can know securely that we don't have to worry about other batches or classes. And screening and cleaning, again, those of you who have been participating in hybrid may be familiar with our health screening app, where we expect everyone to provide answers to 3 easy questions about potential symptoms. That's the RUVNA app. And if you're not yet familiar, you will become familiar. In addition, we are taking temperature at the door, and our staff are being asked to, if they see a student who have potential symptoms, they'll refer them to the nurse, and the nurse will decide what has to happen. Cleaning, of course, we have really strict cleaning protocols in place. We're disinfecting every evening, and then during the day, disinfecting and wiping down all high-touch surfaces, things like banisters on stairwells, things like that. Environmental management is a big one for HLA2, as we have an entirely new HVAC system in that building. And we did that to ensure that we have proper ventilation, proper air pull of fresh air from the outside as much as we can. And we've added an ionization unit to that. So that is an enhanced filtration system. The idea being, of course, like the better airflow and the better air sanitization that we can get, the safer the environment. And then finally, starting to touch on some of the things that are a little bit different this time around. Vaccines are available. I'm going to speak a little bit more about that in a minute. And we will continue with our regular testing. And again, I'll speak a little bit more about some changes to that on the next slide. So let's go ahead and advance. Thank you. All right, so as I mentioned, we do COVID testing on site. This time around, this will be mandatory for all staff, for whom it's always been mandatory, and for all students who are participating in the hybrid program. So if you're participating in hybrid, you are expected to consent to testing. Testing is not every day, and it's not even every week for students. We are doing it on a rotating schedule. Eventually, we will test every student. These are simple and non-invasive tests. It's a front of nose swab, and it's very quick. But this time around, it's mandatory, as we think it's really important for us to get a read on the health of our students. And as I mentioned before, we have been able to catch asymptomatic cases in the past, so it's really a helpful tool for us. Vaccination is also something that's brand new for everyone. Vaccines are now available, and Hebrew Public does believe that this is a really critical tool in providing a safe environment for our students and for our staff. And so we have undertaken an internal campaign encouraging staff to get vaccinated if they can. I also want to note for everyone who's listening that this Thursday, the 25th at 6 p.m., we are going to be having a panel about the COVID vaccines. We have a couple expert doctors, a public health doctor and a frontline doctor, who are there, and they're going to speak about the vaccine and answer any questions. So We encourage everyone to join. And if you have any questions about the vaccine, about safety, about anything about the vaccine, we will have doctors on site on that Zoom to answer those questions. And we are seeing an increased number of our staff being vaccinated, which we're really excited about. And then finally, one thing that is a little bit different this time in our response to positive cases, we're not changing if there is exposure, anybody who is exposed to a potential exposed to somebody with COVID, we still will be following all the quarantine protocols that we are required to follow. And so a classroom, if there is exposure, that class will be asked to shift to remote for a short period of time, and then can reintegrate when that time has passed. However, prior to our closure, we were following the DOE guidance when it comes to what determines full school closure. And their guidance was basically if more than one case occurred in a school, give or take a few scenarios, but mostly if 2 cases occurred in a school, the whole school would be closed for a period of time. We are not going to be that reactive this time around. We're going to try to take a more thoughtful approach, and we're going to work directly with the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene this time to determine exactly what to do in the case, because we now know what does it take with more confidence, what does it take to keep a safe school environment. And we know that like 2 cases does not necessarily mean we have to close the whole school. So we may have to, but we are going to work with the Department of Health to make those decisions. All right, we can go to the next slide. And finally, I just want to talk really briefly about this concept of layered mitigation, because this is key to what we're doing here. The idea here, and you see this images of the Swiss cheese model of mitigation. The idea being that no individual initiative or protocol is sufficient, and it takes all of them. So in this example, each of these slices of Swiss cheese represent a different protocol: mask wearing, social distancing, hand washing, so on. The idea is that each of these individually are critical to our success in keeping a safe environment, but individually are also not perfect. And so, for example, a cloth mask, think of the slice of cheese as the cloth mask initiative, and the chance of spread in our school hits that slice of cheese. Most of it gets caught by the slice of cheese or the mask wearing, but there are holes. And so there's other opportunities that do get through. Then we have social distancing. More of that chance of spread hits that slice of cheese, there are fewer holes that it could get through, and so on and so forth. And the more slices of cheese you add, or the more layers of mitigation efforts you have, the safer environment you create, with the hope being that as many as we have, as many protocols as we have in place, if we are doing them all successfully, we have as safe an environment as we possibly can. So, which is all to say, our success in this is due to a lot of the work that our staff and our students are doing to help us maintain these. And so, again, thank you for supporting your students in doing that. And thank you to our staff for supporting that. And we ask, keep it up, because now that we're reopening, we need it all back again. So. All right, and with that, I am going to hand it back over to Emily, who's going to talk a little bit about state assessments.
Thank you, Jonathan. So in addition to everything we are planning for and have been planning for quite some time with reopening, we are also planning for math and ELA state assessments. A week ago today, New York State announced that the math and ELA and science for grades 4 and 8, but math and ELA for grades 3 through 8, those exams would be implemented. And they gave us the windows to do so. So I just want to share a little bit about this. You will have already received a letter today with more details, but a few headlines here. First, the state has designated that only students who attend school in person are hybrid students who come into the building. Only those students will be taking the exam. There will be no remote administration. So if a student is in the remote only program, they will not be taking the exam. These exams must happen in the building. And so they are only being administered to hybrid in-person students. In order to prepare our students and our staff for the logistical process of running a state exam, we are having a dress rehearsal or a mock exam or a practice test the week of April 12th. This will be a little shorter than the actual exam, and it will be one day for each cohort where they get a chance to practice. What is it like to take an exam of this style? For our staff, to make sure that we have enough proctors for every room, that we have our room set up, our paper management. There's a real clear protocol around managing these exams for security with the state. And so we'll have that practice so that staff are ready and students are ready. The week of April 19th, we will have our ELA exam. It is only one day, and so you'll see 2 dates here. That's for each cohort. So on Tuesday, cohort A will have their exam, and on Thursday, cohort B will have their exam. Same for math. May 4th, a Tuesday, will have an exam, and May 6th, the other group of students that Thursday will have their exam, which is another difference this year. Usually a state exam is 2 days each, 2 days for math and 2 days for ELA. This time there is only 1 day of it. It is also going to be multiple choice. And it's just tailored in this way to make it a bit more manageable at this stage in the game. I want to say this about this exam. I've already had some conversations with families who are concerned that this exam is happening, or that feel, with all of the changes that we've had in schooling since the pandemic started, is this right to test our kids right now? A few things you should know. One, this exam is not going to be used for any of their grades, to determine promotion to the next grade or retention in the grade they're in, to add to their academic file and any type of legacy that would affect applications to middle school or even high school. It is not going to be used in that way whatsoever. We are strictly going to be implementing this exam per the state's guidance, and just sharing that information with you and having it as one reference point for us. It is not at all a determining factor. We are focused on making sure that your students, your children, feel confident, feel prepared, and almost relaxed that, okay, I'm ready, right? I can do this. My teachers are here for me. My teachers care for me. And I have this day. I'm going to show what I know. It is really not in this year a high stakes exam in the same way that you may have experienced it or even thought of it before. So that's one thing I just want you all to know of how we are approaching it. Now, we are going to make sure everything is in place so children are prepared and that staff are prepared. And we want you to know we understand the challenges of an exam in this type of context. If for some reason you, feel as your family's choice that is, you do not want your child to take that exam this year, as with every year, families do have the choice to opt out of taking the exam, and you'll see that in the family letter. There's a process, there's a simple link that you click and fill in, and then a member of our team will be in touch with you. You would still have attendance for that day. You would have the option of completing a work packet in the school building or at home and still submitting it for attendance. We do think that's a family's choice, and we will support you in whatever choice you make. However, we just want you to know we're doing everything we can to make sure that that is a successful day for your child, should you want your child to take it. And we are fully prepared to have every child be as successful as possible on those days. Okay, let me go to the next slide, please. Great, I'm going to hand it back to John to talk a bit about what comes next after the spring.
So if we've learned anything in the last year, it's that it's really hard to predict what's going to come next. What's going to happen in terms of the virus's progression, new research about the risks associated with it. But we've also learned a lot. And we, as my colleague Jonathan mentioned earlier, we keep a really close eye on the research and on the data. And as we move towards having more staff vaccinated, as more of the adults in the Brooklyn community get vaccinated, as the virus begins to wane, as we move closer to what they call herd immunity, our prediction is that we will have a full-time return to in-person learning next school year. And again, we can't guarantee that, but that's what I would say our plan A is, even as we continue to do contingency planning. To be determined is what the procedure will be for families that nonetheless want to continue with remote learning. So we're doing planning around that now and research into it, and we'll share more information with you as we develop our plans in that regard. But we are very optimistic that we should be able to welcome children back full-time in person next year. In addition, as we look ahead to the summer next year, we're really aware of some of the gaps and challenges that children have faced. Academic gaps, socialization gaps. We imagine, for example, that well, not imagine, we can tell that for many of our kindergartners, if they've been fully remote or only in school some of the time, that they've missed critical opportunities to interact with peers in what would be their first experience in K-12 schooling. And some families and children have also really experienced trauma. So I'm going to actually hand it back to Emily Fernandez to talk a little bit about some of our initial planning for the summer.
Thank you. Yes, so I think this has been a thread you've heard me reference throughout the evening, that we're aware of the challenges this year has created for children and for families. And so something we're working on right now is developing some summer opportunities for our children beyond what we would offer in a normal year. So looking at kids who are struggling academically and partnering them with outside tutors or small group academic environments to kind of give them an extra leg up as they head into the fall, so that they're not coming off of 2 months without academics in the traditional sense, but that they have a little bit of a leg up as they enter September. We're also looking at summer camp. Just what does it look like to partner with summer camps that also, really excited about this, have a Hebrew strand woven throughout them. So we're partnering with summer camps that already exist and then pushing in Hebrew immersion opportunities so that children can go have socialization and still continue to get Hebrew exposure in this formal sense over the summer. We're also looking at what it looks like to support kids who have experienced a little bit of a deeper trauma, who might need counseling or one-on-one support, or would benefit from that connection over those 2 months. We know for some kids, school can really be a place of emotional connection with the teachers and leaders in their schools. And so rather than leave that kind of absence, we're looking at, for some of our kids who are in the most need, how we can provide them with that support over the summer. So more to come with all of it. We're looking at subsidizing it similar to the child care program, so that, particularly for our kids who are experiencing the most need, this is not a cost. This is a service we're providing. And then for some of the more optional, just fun stuff, where we can make it affordable and connect families with partners, so that families have that choice and can feel good about keeping their kids involved in a clear way this summer. Okay. I'm going to hand it to Ashley to talk a bit more, if we fast forward through the summer and thinking about what could next year at HLA2 be, some highlights there.
So one of the things, Emily, that you made me think of is just how important it is that all of our kids and our families feel at home at HLA2, regardless of their background, and really thinking about how we meet the needs of all of our students. One of the parts of our day that is so special for that is morning meeting, to build social and emotional skills, to set goals, academic, social. We will absolutely have that and be further building out our programming as we utilize responsive classroom. Families have also been, and when I say families, I mean parents, brothers, sisters, grandma, whoever is at home, have been participating in our virtual community meetings. We are so excited to have that next year, to see, what times bring, if those are virtual at school or we have some ways to gather while at school. Definitely with our mascot there, who will be named, but a prized part of our community. One of the other pieces that we have missed this year, while we have been learning from home, is Olam Hour. And so that's a time where students participated in elective, and those electives were from kindergarten all the way up: basketball, STEM, cheer, dance, drama. We had game clubs, we had crafts, a real opportunity for students, again, to choose something that they're passionate about and to build connections across classrooms. And that's a time that we look forward to having back. We've also thought outside the box while we've been remote about how to ensure some special parts of our culture have remained intact, although different. So a winter concert. We have our art show, which is virtual, our virtual talent show, bringing back our Hebrew plays, thinking about how to bring back field day, which our entire community is incredibly invested in. We see everyone's competitive side come out, but we have managed to move that virtual. Coming up, we'll have our Israel Celebration Day. Some of you may remember Miss Alfarhan, one of our kindergarten teachers, now teaching fourth grade, worked with a team of us to actually build a plane inside of the school and simulate a flight to Israel. And so when I look forward to the future and what it holds, I am extremely excited and optimistic. It is a privilege to continue to work and learn alongside of our students and families and staff each day. So some of you are wondering, we're still at our current site, but we have shared some updates recently. So I'm going to turn it over to John to speak a bit more about our new space.
Absolutely, and thank you, Ashley, for that introduction. We have been sharing regular communications with the school community. Just a reminder for folks who are either new to us or who will be, since we're recording this presentation, who may be listening to it in the future. I'll give a super brief history here because I know we've all been talking for a while. When we moved into our current location on Stillwell Avenue, the intention had always been that it would be a short-term location. We'd be there for maybe 2 or 3 years while we found a permanent and larger location for our wonderful school. It didn't work out that way, and construction is challenging even during a time when you don't run into things like a pandemic. But the location that we had entered into a bunch of contracts to implement at 166 Kings Highway, just a few blocks from our current location on Stillwell Avenue. It didn't work out. The construction company declared bankruptcy. The effort to hire a new construction company was tied up by lawyers and a surety company for months. And just as we were getting that unwound, the pandemic struck. And at that point, the entity that had lent the money through a tax-exempt public bond to us decided that it just wasn't worth proceeding, as did we. It wasn't going to get built in a timely way. And so we switched to look for alternatives. The location we found, which we've shared information about the community with in recent weeks and months, in which you can see a photo of what the building will look like when it's complete, is a multi-use residential structure going up on Cropsey Avenue, right near the Belt Parkway, 3 blocks from Bensonhurst Park, easy walking distance to that park. It will have outdoor play space. We will have the entire huge 3rd floor. And the anticipated completion date, unfortunately, is not for next school year. We're going to continue in our Stillwell site for 1 more year, but the year after that, the 22-23 school year. The new site will have a full gymnasium and multipurpose room combined for those purposes, a large cafeteria, over 24 classrooms, including specials classrooms, and outdoor playground space, even separate from the nearby Bensonhurst Park. It'll be terrific, and we are grateful to everyone for your patience. And we know that the current site, while wonderful in many ways, is small. So we're continuing our efforts to get a Play Street application approved, which will enable us, when approved, to use one of the nearby streets for part of each school day, or at least a few school days a week for kids to have some outdoor time. We are going to be doing some modest internal construction this summer to make sure that the space is configured in the way best possible so that we can welcome our incoming 5th graders next year. And I want to assure you, we're also limiting the number of new students in grades 1 through 5 coming in to ensure that our classes are not overcrowded and that we can accommodate everyone who's in the building. If I can have the next slide, please. So I do want to share just briefly some closing thoughts. Again, our hearts go out to all of you. We know it's been a really tough year. We're going to continue to be grounded in our values as we try to support your children and our own team and your families. I want to emphasize what's different about us, right? We are a small charter network, but our focus on modern Hebrew and the study of Israel, our commitments to diversity and inclusion, our commitment to providing individualized help for every child. We hope that those things have continued to show for you this year, and that you'll continue to be part of the HLA2 and Hebrew public community going forward. We're also here for any questions you have. You can see our emails here on this slide. School-specific questions to Ms. Furin. Questions about our program model can go to Emily Fernandez, our Chief Schools Officer. Operations and health and safety questions to my colleague Jonathan Worley. And if you have broader questions about mission or strategy or the charter school sector, you should feel free to reach out to me directly. In some cases, we might direct your question to a colleague of ours with more specific knowledge and in a position to help you directly, but we will always respond to you. So we want to thank you again for your time and for being part of the HLA2 community.
John, thank you so much. I want to reiterate how committed we are to ensuring that no question goes unanswered. Emily, John, Jonathan, thank you so much for being here and sharing all of this with the HLA2 community this evening. As John shared, our emails are up on the screen for you. I invite you to snap a quick photo, and we'll also be posting this online for you to review at a later time. Thank you all so much for coming this evening, and have a great evening.